Let's begin. Hello, and a warm welcome to the third installment of five-part lecture series titled Human Condition, a Buddhist Perspective, which is being presented by Dr. Lancaster and organized by the Religious Study Department at the University of West. My name is Miro Sake, and I'm chair of the department. Today, I'm honored and pleased to introduce our esteemed speaker, Professor Louis Lancaster. One of the key teachings of Buddhism is impermanence, which emphasizes that everything is subject to change and nothing is permanent. All age is a manifestation of impermanence, to be accepted and embraced. The challenge and difficulty that arise with old age can provide opportunity for personal growth and development. In today's lecture, Dr. Lancaster will focus on the topic of the future of old age, physical and technological, from the Buddhist perspective, exploring the human condition. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Professor Lancaster.
Thank you very much, Rose, and hello to everybody again. Happy to have you with us tonight. Well, with this topic, we return to the story of Shakyamuni's ride through the streets in his chariot when he meets with the great messengers of the human condition. On the second outing, the young prince catches sight of an old man who is bent and weak as he struggles along, leaning on a cane. Filled with youthful vigor, Shakyamuni can't believe that this is something that will happen to him. When he's told that all humans face old age, he is in despair and anger. If being young and strong is just a prelude to old age and weakness, then being young drops in his estimation. Now, throughout the texts of Buddhism, we find references to aging. It is defined as such things as decaying, broken down, turning gray, failing faculties. And in a wonderful poetic fashion, a description of old age mobility issues, thinking to step in one direction, I step in another. Well, you would think that I'm the right person for this lecture, since I'm now in my 9th decade of life. However, I have to tell you that old age came upon me unexpectedly. My first recognition of my age came at an academic conference panel. A debate had arisen over one of the positions put forward by a speaker. To my great surprise, the chair of the panel said, "We have in the audience one of our elders, Professor Lancaster. Let's ask him to help us with this issue." Well, I wanted to shout that he had it all wrong, that I was still a young scholar with promise, not an elder who had an answer to every problem. Let me try to show you how much of a surprise it was for me. 2 days ago, I was being driven for shopping, and we paused at a stoplight. And suddenly, without any warning, a car smashed into the rear of ours, and it gave me a great shock. Well, that is how I felt on the day of the conference, sitting as one of the audience, not expecting to be identified as an old man. It was a shock. So I can appreciate the story of Shakyamuni, who was shocked to find out that his destiny was old age. Looking back, I realized that it was Not that old age just suddenly, in that moment at the conference, came upon me. My hair was already streaked with white that had been with me for more than a decade. I just hadn't given recognition to any of these signs of advancing age. So it's not aging that comes upon us suddenly. It's our admission of the reality of it that finally jolts us. And this seems to come upon us without any warning. Now, no one ever taught me about old age. I lived with the idea that one grows up and learns how to be a mature adult, and that's the end of it. It took me some years of decline before I realized that learning how to be old is just as complex as growing up. Now, if you go online for help with aging, there are thousands of offers that promise you can learn to evade old age, hold back the inevitable with supplements, exercises, genetic therapies, cosmetic surgery. But actual help in how to live with aging is hard to find. Someone once asked Suzuki Roshi of the San Francisco Zen Center, what is the major benefit of meditation? They weren't expecting his answer. He said, you meditate in order to enjoy old age. You meditate in order to enjoy old age. He didn't say that meditation would delay or reverse aging, but that it would help with the process of living through those years. Who knows, perhaps with pleasure. The novelist Morrison holds that a story is not about the story. It's about something else of importance in life. So the story of Shakyamuni seeing an old man is not what the story is about. Rather, it is about change and the discomfort that comes with it. So how are we to understand Suzuki Roshi's answer about meditation and old age? If old age is just one aspect of change, then we can reword his answer. You meditate in order to deal with change. So what's the big problem with change? We live with it. It's all around us. Everything is undergoing it moment by moment. The problem with change is that we very often have a feeling of pain when it happens. So how can we have change that is not tied to suffering? In meditating, the practitioner's focus is on breathing, counting each breath in a way to focus the mind and still the thoughts that overwhelm us. Breathing and observing our thoughts show us that breath comes in and goes out, and a thought arises, survives for a millisecond, and then disappears. This rise and fall of thoughts and breathing are our most basic experiences of change. So the goal of meditation is to have the experience of this change without any suffering. And if we've mastered any part of dealing with change without suffering, we will be better prepared to face old age. But learning to live with change requires some practice. Some years ago, I decided when I was getting a new car that it gave me a good opportunity to deal with change. I picked the car up at the dealer's. Its surface was shiny, unblemished, without a single dent. The engine purred with power, and it had the smell of newness. Climbing into it for the first time, I began to remind myself that all of these signs of newness would decay, and the car would grow old and dented, with some paint flaking, and the engine would come to need constant repair and replacements. So my attempt was to expect to have these changes occur. And since I was in expectation, I would not be caught unaware. I smugly patted myself on my back for such a wise move. And the first time someone scraped the side of the car in a parking garage, I was prepared. It was pleasing to be able to accept the damage to my car in a calm fashion. But there was one fatal flaw with my practice of accepting change. I thought that my car would undergo these alterations. My car that I identified as mine, while I was philosophical and even at ease with the aging of my car, I did not include myself in the process. I remained permanent, not subject to the same changes as my car. Throughout the practice, I lived with the contradiction of my car growing old while I watched it from a superior position of acting, as if I was somehow suspended in time and space, not being aware of the fact that I was also changing at the same time as my car. And so I was caught surprised and upset at the conference when shown to be an old man. I was living with the false idea of a permanent and unchanging self, while thinking all the time that I was doing something very Buddhist by recognizing and accepting changes in my car. Well, of all the things that changed, there's probably nothing that compares to old age. Every day is filled with noticeable and significant change. One's body is no longer consistent, no longer functioning in a reliable fashion. How I feel today is no guarantee for tomorrow. Now, if these rapid changes upset me and cause me pain and angst, then old age is guaranteed to be difficult. I think this is the major message I can see about the use of Buddhist practices in my final years of decline. The greatest gift is to have change without any regrets, any anguish. We might say that it is merely the need to come to grips with the way life is. Now, not everyone is lucky enough to grow old. There is, after all, only one alternative to old age. A young friend asked me how I felt about being an old man. And as I tried to find an answer, it came to me that old age is all that stands between me and death. So I was able to answer him saying, in some ways, I delight in old age and consider it a significant gift. Well, nonetheless, it has been difficult to fully accept that I am forced every day to learn something more about aging. Nothing I was ever taught prepared me for the changes in my physical condition. Even when my balance and strength was no longer enough to ensure that I could walk safely, I delayed using a cane. I was ashamed to be seen as an old man needing one. Then I fell, walking up the path to the front door of my house. And suddenly, a cane became my best friend. The lessons keep on coming. Now I've graduated to a rolling walker. Again, my ego rebelled at the idea of being someone who was so debilitated that I needed a walker. But I like to think I learned a bit more. And so I decided to give myself fully to the walker. I ordered a bright red one. I had my son paint yellow flames on the side, indicating speed and power. So instead of trying to hide the change in my strength, I decided to embrace the walker and maybe enjoy it just a little. Well, old age may not be the most pleasant experience in our lives, but ironically, technology and medical advances are adding years to our time as old people. We are being given longer and longer old ages, and few complain. The problem of the length of old age, I think, will become one of the most important issues for the world of tomorrow. Within the lifetime of anyone in their 20s, the time will come when the old will outnumber the young. Demographics already show that if present trends continue, then in North America and Europe, there will only be one person still working for each person over 65. Japan has the longest life expectancy in the world. But with the lack of a birth rate that replaces the workforce, their government is already acutely aware of the problems. So one possible solution is to create robots to care for the needs of the elderly. And toward this end, the Japanese government is currently spending 1/3 of its budget on such robotic research for aging. Now, while the global population has nearly tripled since the middle of the last century, it has not been evenly distributed. Japan, Western Europe, Russia, North America are all having very low birth rates, while India, Indonesia, South America, Sub-Saharan Africa account for much of the increase in world population. So that's why I entitled this lecture, The Future of Old Age. It seems pretty certain that people will have to be productive for a longer period of their extended life. So what does Buddhism offer for this future? First, these demographic issues will be global. So the world of this future would be wise to follow the example of the Buddha and put aside ethnic and racial biases and work together for the sake of all humans and all sentient beings. Now, the very worst reaction will be governments waging war against each other. Such wars will only further decimate the young population, the opposite of what will be needed to care for aging citizens. At the present rate of birth, by the end of this century, the population of Russia will be less than what is projected for Yemen. And the idea of control of such a vast landscape, 1/16 of the Earth's surface, will be beyond what is possible. Now, the current war with hundreds of young men being killed is making this crisis even more acute for the future of the Russian people, as well as for the Ukraine. In the near future, young people will be in high demand, and cries against immigration will, I think, be muted in favor of having a sufficient workforce to maintain living standards. Given the situation, a world filled with old people will surely need compassion. Compassion for the aged and compassion for the young who must care for them. If we can be objective about the human condition, see it as it really is, recognize the need to work in harmony for the sake of survival, have a compassionate populace, then the future need not look so frightening. The time to start preparing for the future is now, and we all need to be a part of the solution. Old age can be a time of spiritual practice, a final period of fully expressing the depth of the human condition. I feel blessed to have had so much time as an old man. I also feel deep gratitude to all the younger group who have helped sustain me and allow me to still have a productive life. There's still much for me to experience. And I want to thank those of you who are watching this lecture for giving me a chance to explore and search in my human condition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lou, for your lecture. Your lecture was exceptional and deeply moving. and we express our gratitude for for sharing your experience with us. Our question association will now commence, and we kindly request that you type your question in the chat box.